Good evening and welcome to the Township of Lopatcong Planning Board meeting for April 2018. At this time, I'd like to invite you to join us in a silent moment of prayer, followed by the oath of allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'm required to state that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided indicating the time and place of the meeting in accordance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975 by advertising a notice in the Star Gazette and the Express Times and by posting a copy on the bulletin board in the municipal building. Beth, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Members Correa?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Chesky?
Yes.
Pryor?
Here.
Schneider? Weeks?
Here.
Chairman Gucci? Vice Chairman Fishback?
Here.
Chairman Van Vliet?
Here.
Alternate Steinhardt? Here. And Tyler?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Oh, we do.
Okay. Proceed to old business at this time. Has everyone received a copy of and read the minutes of the March 28th, 2018 meeting? Are there any additions, corrections, or comments on that?
I can only vote on the portion for which I was here.
And I just wanted to add that I added Adam's name to the section where I talked about, you know, the training
Yes.
that we conducted, or he conducted.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that the record was clear.
With that addition noted, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll stay.
I would like it on the record that I went back in, listened to the whole meeting, read all the minutes, went back in and did all the paperwork, did everything. I have presented a letter to you.
Okay,
All right, I'd like to have that on the record.
good. I think that's acceptable.
I'd like to abstain too.
Okay, very good. Noted those two abstentions and the explanation from Member Weeks. We're set to go, I guess. The first application is from Autumn Ridge, Lopatcong, Block 116, lots 2602, 27, 2702, and 28. I don't think there'll be a presentation this evening, but we are going to entertain them to be deemed complete, and I'll defer to our engineer for any comment on that.
Are you speaking of K&S? Right. Sorry.
I'm sorry, it's Autumn Ridge, it's the resolution for them?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's a resolution, I'll defer to the attorney to...
Before the members tonight is a resolution that I prepared. It was reviewed by the engineer. The engineer did make some modifications to it. They were minor in nature. The most significant from the original one that I transmitted, the most significant or material change was an additional condition, subparagraph S on page 15, regarding construction after taxes and fees are paid and outside approvals and waivers. So it has been transmitted to the applicant's attorney as well, and they've not indicated any type of objection.
Okay. Any questions by board members on the resolution?
This is the most current version, the same.
First version, yes, those are the ones that were
Thank you.
with Paul's correction.
Yes.
Again, upon advice of our attorney, I recuse myself. I won't be voting on tonight's resolution.
Okay.
I just saw like a typo for Larkin. It's L-A-R-K-I-N or K-E-N? Because I believe it's K-E-N.
What page do you know?
Not really on top of my head, but it's only one time that it was spelled wrong.
Very good. I'll go through it and see what I can.
You know.
I believe E-N is the correct spelling.
It's I-N?
E-N.
E-N,
Just
yeah,
like
I
you
believe
said.
so. That's the way I seen it in all the,
E-N.
when I handle stuff with them, so.
Okay.
But it was I-N. I don't know if it makes any sense,
With that revision, I'll forward the corrected version with that modification, post-approval. There'll be, the motion would be to approve as amended with the correction for the typographical.
Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
Make a motion to approve it with the corrections noted.
I second it.
Beth, roll call, please.
Yes. Members Korea?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Chesky?
Abstain.
Pryor is recusing. Weeks?
Approved.
Vice Chairman Fishback?
Yes.
Chairman Van Vliet?
Yes. Do you want to include the votes of the alternate members?
No need, it's the
It's-
people that,
Okay,
you have plenty of people.
I have
that-
enough, yeah.
You have plenty of
Okay.
people to approve the
Very good.
resolution.
okay, motion's carried then. Now we can move on to K&S Enterprises, Block 100, Lot 2 completeness. Do you have any comments on that? I know Paul had,
Sure, Chairman. Hopefully all the members have our most recent letter from April 20th that was issued. In it, we review completeness as well as technical items on the plans. The applicant previously was deemed incomplete February and March, and they since resubmitted plans addressing our completeness comments. Their main reason for being deemed incomplete before was that they hadn't received the consistency determination from the Highlands Council. They have since received that. Then there were some minor waivers, checklist item waivers that they were requesting, but really they don't really apply to the nature of their development. So we would recommend that all those checklist items be granted, the waivers be granted, and the board should deem the application complete tonight.
Adam, can I just ask a question on that?
Sure.
Paul broke it up in that Adam's not applicable when waivers,
Right.
and he usually leaves the waivers up to us.
Sure.
And you're saying tonight that you don't think the waivers are substantive?
Well, I mean,
We can...
if you'd like me to review those.
No, I'm saying in your opinion,
Right.
there's no problem with
Exactly.
waiving them. All right.
Adam, can I ask one or two questions?
Sure.
If we're talking about this big building which is going up behind the railroad track, right?
Correct. So that's their Phase 1 building that was approved back in 2010, 2011.
Okay, when somebody gets approval for a building like that, right, they have to come back after a certain time to get this reapproved, or is this, how long is an application like that valid?
I'm not entirely sure. Maybe Attorney Bryce would know.
I think that this is a separate application from what you're seeing.
This
built right
is,
now.
well, I can cover that. The Phase 1 project had a pre-construction meeting in the fall of last year, so they started that construction. So, yeah, they were granted approval in 2011 for the first building.
Okay.
And they're currently building it. I don't know, I guess, obviously the application was still valid, the approval was still valid, because they started construction.
as far as I know, I wasn't on the board.
I also wasn't.
And I may be mistaken, but I'm under the impression that if you get like an approval that's valid for 7 years, 6 years?
No, generally, the municipal land use law allows for a preliminary approval to give you a period of repose from a zone change for a period of time. It always remains valid. You have to take action on it. Some towns and municipalities have ordinances that try to limit the amount of time in which a application approval is permitted, especially when a variance is granted. That gives the applicant a certain amount of time to move on the application and build. I'm not sure if you guys have that type of ordinance here, but generally under the municipal land use law, if you get a subdivision or site plan approval, you're given periods of repose against any type of zoning change against that particular
So they
development.
applied in 2010, they have like 30, 40, 50 years until they actually can start building? There's no time limit as of how long this is?
No, and I'll take a look at your ordinances to see if you have some specific limitation under the municipal land use law. No, generally not. As you get an approval, you can move on that approval at various times. I think what may be a little bit confusing here, and I'm just trying to clarify because I wasn't here for the first one, is that they had a site plan approval for what they considered to be Phase 1, which you're seeing built right now.
Okay.
What is now before the board, as I understand it, is a second application, not for what's being built right now, but for a different portion of the property where they want to build. So they don't have a site plan for what they're doing right now, what they want to do in the future. That's what's coming here now.
Okay.
So that's what we're reviewing now, and they'll be providing testimony next month on their Phase 2 project, which is another building addition, an office building addition to the building that's being built now.
More or less, the building that's being built now is an existing feature as far as the
current plan is
Yes,
that you should have gotten copies of, it's
Yeah.
shown as an existing Phase 1 building.
Right.
That's currently under construction, but yeah,
Okay.
previously approved.
Any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to deem the KNS application complete
And grant the waivers.
and grant the waivers.
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second? Second? Roll call, Beth, please.
Yes. Members Korea,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Orchesky,
Yes.
Pryor,
Yes.
Weeks,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Fishback.
Yes.
Chairman Bentley. Yes.
Yes. And we will carry the notice to the May meeting. I understand it should be coming up. And then we had discussed previously that if it went past June, the way it looked, I think in January, we would have them renoticed, but they're coming in, and they're proposing to come in May.
That's right. Not that there's any public here, but if there's anyone in the public that's here for the KNS application, the notice has been carried to the June meeting, and no further notice will be provided.
The June meeting or the May meeting?
Did I misspeak?
Yeah.
The May meeting.
Yeah, okay.
May meeting.
Okay.
Next month.
You put June in it.
But-
That will be the May meeting. Let me think of that month it was. Members of public that are interested.
Okay, now, we're moving on to the Highlands Center Planning Study 2. We had discussed this at the last meeting, and the member had requested that we defer action until they had more time to review it. Back on it tonight. This is, everyone, refresh up everyone's memory. This is, the Highlands Commission has kind of signed off on it with some proposed requirements for us in order to proceed with the application for the Highlands Planning Study and start drawing down on the monies for the planning from the grant money that we had here. So, George, could you review it a little bit?
Yeah, this was some work that the board did truthfully through most of last year. The report that went up to the Highlands basically contained 5 recommendations for consideration within the Highlands Center area of the township. One of those that's in the report basically was to recognize the Piazza tract, the rezoning of it for affordable housing. That's the 16-acre site. The other dealt with recommendations for zoning changes, and that was within the AARC district. That's the age-restricted zoning district that's located behind the Phillipsburg Mall. That's a property that's about 60 acres. It was discussed with the board, and there was a general sense that since the property was not in a Highlands Center, it could not be sewered, and since the zoning that's on the property requires sewer, essentially it's townhouses, the applicant was, if they proceeded, obviously would have a great deal of difficulties trying to, if they could, get infrastructure to the site. The Highlands Council, at looking at the report, has basically come back and said, well, that's outside the center designation, the one that's currently done, and it would be their sense that if the town wishes to change the zoning on that tract from what it is today to something different and incorporate it into the center, this planning report is not the mechanism that they would recommend. That they believe that has to be addressed through a full, basically, amendment to the Highlands Center itself, which would require hearings in front of the Highlands Council. It would require us to submit all sorts of studies to do it. And they've raised the question of whether or not it should even be done, let alone whether we want to go that route. So that's one of the items that's up actually for further discussion, whether or not the board feels it's appropriate to pursue incorporating that site in at this time, or just leaving the site as it is currently zoned, and with the assumption that if and when something happens back there, we can address it at a later date, which quite frankly we can. So that's one of the things that's up for discussion and was noted in the Highlands review. The other aspect of the zone, in terms of zoning, was to repeal the overlay district in the ROM district. If some of you may or may not remember, there is an overlay district that extends over the got it on my head, over the ROM district, that allows developers options in terms of mixing uses and intensity of development. It's been around since 2004. There hasn't been a developer that has chosen to utilize any of that. And quite frankly, it was originally put in there when the Ingersoll tract was first being discussed for redevelopment purposes. Well, obviously, since 2004, there's been an adopted redevelopment plan, which has been approved and is proceeding out there in development phase on the site. It is generally felt that the remaining portions of the ROM district, it's probably not worth the investment or carrying it on the books, because the real intent was to try to get a mixed-use project on the Ingersoll tract. So there's a recommendation in this report that that overlay district be repealed. It wouldn't change anything that's in the industrial district. It wouldn't affect any of the users that are out there. It would just eliminate something that no one's chose to use since 2004, and that's the option to mix uses. No one has chosen to do that, and I don't think anybody will going forward, particularly given the fact that we're having difficulty providing adequate sewer service to the area anyhow. So without having that gallonage available, or additional gallonage, it's very unlikely that anybody's going to be proposing mixed-use projects, more intense-use projects, because they simply won't be able to sewer them. So the recommendation in here is to repeal that portion of the regulations. The other recommendation that's in here deals with your RB district, which is the older district that's right on Route 22. There was discussion there about the fact that that district allows a mix of both single-family and commercial uses. And there was a strong feeling that that area should be looked at to determine how that area should be handled. There's a lot of nonconformities in there. In other words, a lot of the lots don't match the area setbacks. They don't have the space to really meet the ordinances that are in place today. Almost all of them trigger variances and that type of thing. And also there was a concern that, what is the district? Is it commercial? Is it residential? Or what is the intent? So what the board recommended last year was expanding the R75 zone to cover the existing single-family homes that currently exist in the RB district, to incorporate them back into the R75 and actually protect them. And then there's a recommendation that the standards be adjusted within the remaining within the remaining RB district, to eliminate many of the variances, so that the people that are living down there don't have to, every time they want to do an addition or fix something on their house, have to come back in front of the zoning board and ask for relief. So the ordinance says that what we'd like to do for the residential portion is change the design standards in that district from 7,000 to 5,000, reduce the required lot width from 75 to 50 feet, reduce the various setbacks, the front yard from 25 to 20 feet, basically reduce the side yards to 12 to 10, and the rear yard to 25 feet. We think that would eliminate almost all the conflicting standards and actually make a better fit for those that are in the district today, and would eliminate them having to get variances just to simply live in their house. The other recommendation, which the Highlands Council did respond to was that the board felt that continuing to allow commercial development in the RB district was not necessarily a bad idea, but that most of the lots are so small and difficult to work with that it would make more sense to encourage, if you're going to do commercial, larger lots, to have them assemble larger lots. And the recommendation at that time was to increase the minimum lot size for commercial activities from 7,000 to 10,000 square feet, to hopefully get them, if they are going to develop new stuff, actually assemble enough ground to at least have a shot at providing parking and getting a little bit improved layouts versus simply taking a single-family home and converting it. The Highlands, the question they came up with was not so much they objected to the lot size change, but they did point out that obviously if the average lot size is 6,000, 7,000 square feet, and we say the minimum is 10 for commercial, we've actually created the potential for nonconformities. And their recommendation was, think about it, do you really want to do that or not? That was the question they raised. So it really comes down to, in that sense, whether or not you feel that making the shift to a little bit larger lot will have any significant impact on any future commercial development there, and whether it'll help get a better sense of the commercial that comes in. Obviously, the commercial that's there today is all grandfathered. It really doesn't matter. So that was that recommendation. And then the final recommendation dealt with best management practices. The Highlands regulations have asked that in carbonate rock areas and areas that have groundwater, a high yield capability for groundwater availability, that the town consider adopting best management practices for those uses that might be a major source of contaminants. And what they're really saying there is that it's not that you can't do the uses, the various uses that are listed on this use, and they're in the back of the report. It's just that if you do them, you have to do best management practices to control spills, to make sure that it doesn't get into the streams and get into the groundwater of the site. So there's basically, and the regulations also go on to say that if you get various state permits, of course you're exempt from, as long as you get the permit, you've met best management practices. This recommends that in our non-residential districts that the township adopt basically that for potential polluters, that they be subject to best management practices in our non-residential districts. If they come in with a use that's on the list, essentially they would have to produce a plan that shows how they're going to manage potential sources of pollution, and that program has to be designed around best management practices for that use. It also states that any new uses that come in that are a high classification for pollution cannot locate within a Tier 1 wellhead area. In other words, you can't build it right on top of a well. So that's the only outright prohibition, supposedly. If you came in with that, you'd obviously have to get relief. You couldn't put it right next to a Tier 1 wellhead area. So those are the recommendations that were in there that were drafted and put forth in this report. And I'd say that all of them are still, well, obviously subject to your review and consideration again tonight. Other than the center designation, are really consistent with what the board had talked about before. And then the decision of whether or not we should withdraw our request to consider adding the AARC district into our center. That's something we should discuss tonight and decide if that's something we want to do or not do going forward. And I think that's a quick overview, and I'll try to answer any questions anybody has.
Mr. Chairman, I was the fellow that asked that this be delayed a month, so I did review it. Maybe I could walk through my comments, get the conversation started. George, the piazza is just really housekeeping at this point. There's no problem there. The senior zone, I guess the discussion was that it may make sense in that business area, depending on what happens at the mall. There's a story, and I don't know if, how it's documented, that that was negotiated with the Highlands originally. And there may be some kind of agreement that says that'll remain, what, Gary?
I don't know if there was an actual agreement formulated. When we adopted the Highlands plan, when we were up there, I think it was
The center.
the center designations, they looked at that property, and the Ingersoll property was also designated as agricultural preservation. And in order to negotiate getting the Ingersoll property, at the time we looked as one of the last major areas that we would have an industrial development on, they agreed that on their overlay, they would reclassify that as in need of redevelopment, and we could proceed with providing sewerage to it and adding the gallonage, which was the time we did. And that the area behind the mall, since it was almost inconceivable about getting utilities there, would be, overlaid as agricultural preservation, and we never went back to try to change the senior citizens designation. There was a project proposed there, and it met so many obstacles that they withdrew even considering it. The owners of the property came in several times trying to get us to rezone the area at that time. One of the problems of trying to rezone the area at that time with the Highlands overlay is we'd have to go back, as George said, and make a reapplication for our center designations coming back, which meant we would have to redo all of the task scheduling that was meant in the beginning, which was have a stormwater plan adopted, have a sanitary plan adopted, which was, we're one of the few communities that have gotten it done so far. So I really didn't think it was applicable to try to tackle rezoning that area. If the applicant himself wanted to go to the Highlands and try to make an appeal to them, they did go. They were turned down on it one time, and then it just kind of died on the vine of trying to go back. They wanted us to try to go there and do that rezoning and get it into a residential area, not necessarily senior citizens, but some type of a housing development. But it stayed under the overlay project of agricultural preservation. I think the danger of trying to rezone it now, even though it's the best intentions to get it away from the senior citizen, would tick off something that the township doesn't want to spend the money on and getting involved in again. I don't think we would get the original planning money that was enabled us to do that studies, and they were very expensive to come into. So I would think that we would want to just leave it the way it is right now until we have the option of reviewing it if something definite comes up, or where there's an applicant that might want to do something on it. But I think it would be an expensive proposition for the town to undertake right now, and we may lose some of the tasks that were required by the Highlands to become part of the Highlands, and have to review them, and they were no picnic really to try to go through again. So,
can I add to what you just said, Mr. Chairman? I think there's a second half to this too. I think the best shot for soaring that and redeveloping that area, or developing it at all, is tying it to some kind of redevelopment of the mall. There's been some inquiries along those lines. That needs a long, long time to ripen, if it ever does. And if it does, I think you're going to need some kind of special zoning or something special there to accommodate, whatever the mall wants to do. So I feel it's probably best to leave that alone right now. Quickly on the remaining ones, the eliminating the variances at Morris Park. The only reservation I had is, we did that one night with 5 people here, and we didn't really get Morris Park too involved. On the other hand, if we want to move forward, we have plenty of time before that turns into an ordinance, and it seems pretty harmless, in my view. I don't know who would object to it in Morris Park. It can only help.
Leaving the plan as is.
I'll just finish out here. The Highland's comment on the commercial properties, after some thought, I tend to agree with them if I'm reading everything right. I think you said there were only like 6 parcels that were undeveloped, so you know, the impact is relatively small.
It is.
And I think that if somebody, you said it was difficult to work with these small parcels, and I think if somebody had an idea that they wanted to implement, they would naturally look at merger anyway. So my thought is, I probably agree with them on that. The last one is the best management practices. And of course, I certainly don't object to that, but I do have a question. Looking back through the Highlands material, on our checklist is adopting a supplement, a Highlands supplement to our land use ordinance. And the best management practices are included in that supplement. So I agree with them, it's just a question of where you put them. You had some specific recommendations as to specific sections of the code, and I don't know, they have a draft prototype of a Highlands supplement, and they say that you put your name on it, you tweak it, and you can work with that. That has everything in it we're looking for. I just point that out. So those...
What we have in the report is simply recommending that it fall within each of the districts, how we end up implementing it in the end.
Yeah, in their ordinance, it would apply across the, you know, across all the districts. If you, really applies across the town. If you're in a karst district, you know,
Right.
you all have to meet that.
That's exactly right.
Any commercial district, anywhere you would have one of these facilities, it would apply.
Right,
So,
any non-residential district
Yeah.
in essence
Yeah.
would fall under this ordinance.
yeah. So, those are my comments, and thank you.
Anyone else? Eric?
I have 2 questions. My first question is the best management practices. How does that work as far as, you know, who monitors it, who reports it, who enforces it? Is it self-enforced or self-monitored, or is there...
No, they have to actually develop, if it ends up being adopted, the draft form we have in here, the applicant has to come into the town, if he falls within this area of the code, he would have to develop a plan on how he's going to control the potential for pollution getting off-site or getting into the groundwater. That plan gets filed with the town, and the town actually then has oversight in terms of how he does it. I mean, enforcement of it.
So it's town enforcement.
It's town
Okay.
enforcement. They would have to come back through. Now, certain aspects of this, at least in the draft ordinance that the Highland has, is if he gets the appropriate state permits for his industrial commercial development, that substitutes for a plan. In other words, he doesn't have to do 2-3 things. If he meets the state requirements, that'll substitute for the plan. If it happens to be something that doesn't fit within one of those categories, then he has to develop a plan, put it on file. And that would be part of the review of a site plan or anything that comes before this board, that he does the appropriate studies, provides the board with oversight, essentially what he intends to do. So the planning board, or if it went to the zoning board, would actually be looking at whether he's complying or not. And if he happened to fall in a tier 1 area, basically would mean he could not do it without getting a use variance or relief from one of the town board, well, from the zoning board in that case, to proceed.
Okay.
George, if I can just supplement what you said, I mean, if you look through it, there is state involvement. There's things like a discharge prevention, containment, and countermeasure plan. He's subject to CERCLA, he's subject to a whole bunch of things where regulatory agencies really supplement what the town does.
My second question is, I don't know the exact timing of it, but about 2 years ago, the board more or less agreed that if we were going to look at the ROM zone, that we wanted to do it in conjunction with the Highlands grant that we have. Not having any idea when or if that will happen, is there any time constraints that we have if we wanted to include that under the grant money, or is it a little more open-ended? I just don't know if there's a timing constraint that we need to be aware of as far as covering it under the grant money.
Well, the answer is that obviously this, if the board approves this and we send it up, this board can always amend it and go back and if they determine that they want to, you can go back and amend anything. This is not necessarily closed, done, finished, never to be looked at again. So you always have that option. You asked me, is there any money left? The answer is I didn't actually look to see how much is left in the budget tonight, but we haven't burned the entire budget, if that's the answer.
Well, the question is more or less is once we submit it to Highlands and they're okay with it,
yes.
do we bill 100% of?
No, we bill for the time that went in.
Okay.
In other words, they'll reimburse us for the time that was spent as compared to what the grant is.
Right, so it's not lump sum, it's...
No, and if there's any money left over, it'll sit in the grant.
Oh, it actually sits there?
It'll sit there, and under the grant, if it sits there and the town has other uses for it, we can always ask to amend the grant, as long as, the Highlands has always taken the position that as long as the money's being spent in the grant to forward the goals and objectives of the Highlands, they'll let the towns come in and change the grant, make recommendations. In other words, you have to get it approved by them.
Right.
But the money doesn't go away. If we don't spend it, it doesn't disappear either. It just sits in the grant. I don't know if that'll ever, if there'll come a day that ends, but right now, that's what's been happening.
Okay.
And they haven't known to increase the grants to the townships when they implement their own regulations on the township for planning purposes.
Well, yeah, they have been. They've increased the grants depending on if they all of a sudden come up with something they want the towns to consider. They've tended to bring additional monies in for grants for the towns to look at this stuff. I don't know if any of it's in the works now. Almost everybody's working off the grants that have been around for years. But there's no reason to believe they wouldn't if there was something that comes up. But the money won't go away, and we won't be, it isn't like like now the job's done, we fully bill out 100% whether we worked on it or not. It'll stay.
George, if I could add a general question, it might be worthwhile because we got a lot of new members here. As I understand it, you have to petition for the center designation. We did that like in 2012, got our original one, and that's why you call this number 2, I guess. What are the not everybody has a center. What are the benefits of getting a center designation?
Well, the biggest benefit to Lopatcong of getting the center designation is that if you remember when the Highlands regulations originally came out, almost all of your current industrial zoned areas in town are also prime agriculture. So if we didn't proceed with the center designation and actually were successful doing that, and quite frankly, I didn't have any, that was Mazer, I believe, that actually got the center designation. That was not something I worked on. But the real advantage of that is it allows the town the opportunity to extend sewer and water if and when it becomes available into that area. And so one of the main reasons driving the center was to help the town maintain its rateable base, or have the potential, I should say, to have a rateable base out there and be able to extend sewer and water. Because under the original Highlands master plan, the vast majority of that area is prime ag, and it would basically supposedly develop at virtually no density at all.
So, if I'm stating this correctly, you get some relief in favor of higher objectives, economic objectives, and your vision of the community, as opposed to just preserving a piece of agricultural
Well, right,
land.
it was actually on the part of the town, and it was eventually accepted by the Highlands, was to support what has always been the township's goals and objectives in that part of town. In other words, to have the industrial area, to be able to maintain it. And fortunately, the Highlands agreed with that and actually left that go ahead, because if not, that whole area would essentially be zoned for agriculture right now.
Especially the Lopatcong portion,
Well, yes.
because it was a cornfield.
Well, yes.
Winter wheat and other
And
things.
there was also, part of that was also the recognition of the redevelopment of the Ingersoll parcel,
Correct.
which they also had that whole 100-acre area there in agriculture preservation. So, I mean, if you took the combination of where they were today, essentially the town would have had no industrial base left, or, non-residential base left. And it would have basically been cluster, single-family agriculture preservation throughout almost the whole town.
One of the overriding considerations to get into the Highlands program was that if we did join into the planning area, the preservation area was imposed on us. There was nothing we could do with that. The preservation area, it was intimated that basically we would never get any extensions of sewer, water lines, or anything like that if we weren't part of the center designation where that was allowed. Other than that, we would pretty much all agricultural preservation, and they would not approve the extensions of sewer, any improvements that we would have, or anything like that. That was the hammer they would hold over someone that didn't want to go into the Highland Center designations.
So is there any actions that need to be taken right now that will affect our future if we don't take them? Or are we just making plans? Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, do we have to go back in and change something in Morris Park at this point? Do we have to go back in and change something, at the mall? Or are we just making a plan that we really don't know what we're planning for?
Well, no, I think what we're recommending here is something that is in support of the plan. When you talk specifically about the piece behind the mall, that's something that I happen to agree with the chairman, is there's no great pressure to do anything there. That doesn't make any difference. The mall property at someday, I suspect, will become an issue, only because right now the zoning on the property requires sewer and water. And if you can't get it, in essence, that property is zoned into a use that technically you can't do. So at some point it will come up. Is it critical to the town plan that be addressed now? Not at all. Will it hurt the long-term development of the town if we don't address it now? Not at all, because quite frankly, there's things going on at the mall that may next week change our whole opinion as to what that should be anyhow. So I don't see anything lost or given up or damaging to the long-term plan.
Run it down. How about Ingersoll property?
Well, that's covered under the redevelopment plan. That's a done deal. That's all been moved.
It is what it is.
Well, yeah, and it's covered now under the redevelopment regulations, so it's not going to revert back to agriculture preservation. It's going to be developed one way or the other.
No actions need to be taken to change anything to protect or not, or allow, if you want to put it that way, in any fashion. It's already pretty much fixed in that sense.
The Ingersoll piece, yes, that's fixed.
All right, so now back into Morris Park. Is there a reason why we're rezoning?
The RB district?
Yeah, the RB.
Well, the reason there, and I think it's a valid one that the board should consider. I think what has come out of these recommendations is to protect, to a greater deal than what is in the current ordinance, the residential development that's in that area. What we're doing is taking homes that are now in the mixed-use district that could be converted tomorrow for commercial, and we're putting them back in the R75 district, which says that they have to stay single-family. And so I think we're actually providing a better degree of...
And that's what you're recommending?
That's what we're recommending.
Okay.
So I think that helps the people that are living down there. It helps them
Yes.
maintain a more residential community. And if you look at the proposed rezoning, really what we've done is moved the commercial up much, much closer to 22. We've kept it from pushing back into the neighborhood. So I think that's very positive, and I think that can help stabilize that area. The recommendation on the commercial is that's fair game. I have no strong feeling whether we make it 10,000 or leave it alone. So I think the changes in that are, I think would be helpful to the people that are down there.
I actually do believe that you need to let the people have the right size build, and also leave the homeowner its ability to have a yard or whatever. So
Yeah.
I really do believe that the structure of that is pretty good.
Okay.
One more question, and I don't know who I address it to. Where do I find, or does anybody have a list of all your RMCs, your RMMs, your RM12s, and right on down through that you're talking about, so that I can sit back and learn that and study that and understand 100% what you're talking about when you're talking about it? You understand what I'm saying?
You want the zoning map then, basically?
Well, I want to know what you're saying for. I would like to have a paper.
I'm sorry, you're losing me on the RM12s.
I'm not looking for a map of the town, I'm looking for...
Oh, the zoning map. You just want to see a zoning
I know
map.
your initials, what they stand for.
Yeah. The zoning ordinance,
I want to be...
the zoning ordinance and the zoning map is what you need.
Yeah, I want to be able to have it with me when he starts talking, I go, oh, okay, that's residential. All right, this is business.
It's on the
This one
township.
here is for commercial, but only
Yeah.
medical.
Adam, who's the keeper of the zoning map, the master there? Do you have
I
that?
believe that we update it periodically, and then that's linked to the township ordinance, the land use ordinance. It's on the website, and that has a table of all the zones and all their...
Cut and dry.
It's cut and dry
Can you
table.
get zoning maps to everybody here?
Yeah, and also, just for the board, if you want to know, we have 8.5 by 11 zoning maps. That basically, you can just see what the township zoning districts
I mean,
are.
I can print the map.
Yeah, so the
I
map is
would like
linked
to talk
to
about it, he said the same thing, so.
This is what you do.
like a map and a table.
And the zoning ordinance themselves, it's more specific. So it'll actually explain what
That boils it down.
Yeah, that's, you do, so I can get it from you. All right,
So
that's
when-
all I'm looking for.
So when you get onto the actual specifics on the zoning ordinance, this is a schedule. But if you delve into the zoning ordinance, you're actually going to see, well, even here, it does a good job, like the R75, single-family public buildings or facilities. These are the permitted uses.
So it breaks it down
I mean, I
per use and
understand
per
some of them,
zone.
but some of them I had to think about what you were saying too, and you're moving on too fast.
I guess it assumes that you have some overall, you never memorize these tables,
That's what I'm
obviously.
saying.
Yeah.
Where it's his world, it's not really
If you want, I can print them out for next
the
month.
best issue. Thank you, that's all.
Further questions? Well, I guess we can determine what action we would like to take tonight on where we're going to proceed, so if you want to...
Yes.
One last,
Do we have to break these down all individually and just like pick them, like as you explain them, decide them on them all individually and vote on them that way?
If you'd like, or I can give you the two that are you know what I mean? I mean, it'll come out. That's stuttering along. Your pleasure, I can do it either way.
does anybody remember on the commercial side of it, the lots that were commercial, are they adjacent to each other, or are they all scattered around?
You kind of chicken jack, don't you?
Yeah,
We have there's a map, I've drug it out over there. There's a map on the wall.
Oh, wait, yeah, here it is.
That basically shows you where most of the
Yep.
commercial is that remains in the RM.
Yeah, it's right next to it.
Thank you.
what essentially, just for everybody, 22 is coming along here. The mall is right over on this end. The red on this map is properties that are currently in commercial uses in the district. And this is an old map. This does not include the one that matches the board, because what the blue line was where we were going to move the RB district, and what has really changed is that the old red line here is what is currently RB, which includes all these residential areas that were caught in it. And what we did is pull it up so that all these are back in the residential zone, all these are back in the residential zone, that's back in the residential zone. So we've basically pulled the district closer to 22. And as you can see, there's still going to be some residential lots that are sprinkled through there. There's nothing that can be done about that. But what we are doing is preventing it from being pushed further back in the neighborhood.
Would those lots that are scattered throughout the RG zone be considered R75 ones in the township?
I'm sorry?
Would those lots that are scattered throughout the RG zone that, you know, they're just mixed in with them, would they be considered part of the R75 zone?
Well, the district line for R75, it's in my report, but it essentially, the R75 district will come up, go around, go down, pick these up, go along here, so these will all go back in the R75, and then essentially that one goes back in the R75, this goes back, so in a sense, what'll be residential that's sort of in the commercial zone are going to be a few lots sprinkled right through here. There's probably 20 of them, 20, 25 lots. There's still single family in that area.
So the ones that remain in the RB, how many of them would be restricted to residential if we change it to 10,000 square feet requirement?
Wouldn't affect them. The way we were going to write it is that the residential standards would be the way they are today. They actually could exist. They aren't on 10,000 square foot lots. All we'd say is in this district, if you were going to do commercial, you had to do it on a 10,000 square foot lot or larger.
So an existing homeowner that's on 75 foot frontage
is fine as a resident.
Right, but he couldn't sell his house for a doctor's office.
That is correct. Well, he could sell it, but they'd have to get relief from the board. It would be in the commercial zone, but it wouldn't meet the lot standard.
So unless he got relief or bought an adjacent lot.
Correct.
Wasn't that some of the purpose, wasn't the purpose of it, was for them to actually bundle the lots? If we wanted to have, because the parking isn't sufficient, if you're under the current standards,
At least in
all that.
my experience in today's world is that on a 7,000 square foot lot, it's almost impossible to get viable commercial today.
Right.
The lots aren't big enough, they aren't deep enough. 10,000 maybe even stretching it in terms of what most people want. So the idea was that if you're going to do commercial, you somehow have to start assembling pieces.
Right.
If not,
That was the whole intent.
that was the intent.
Right.
But I will say that the Highlands statement is true. There are some lots that are in there today that are commercial, that aren't 10,000 square feet. So they become non-conforming. They might be 7, but they aren't 10.
Would they be grandfathered in?
They'd be grandfathered
Right.
in, but the answer is, that would be that's what the Highlands is talking about, that we'd be creating in the commercial district some lots that would now become non-conforming.
But we've given the residents a peace of mind to know that there's not going to be a camera shop in the other half of the house.
Right.
Right,
All right.
that's the
That to me is the
idea.
important part.
Protecting the...
If they're gonna do something, they're gonna have to buy
So
parcels.
I'm pro-business. It's in where it has to be, where it is.
Exactly.
Gobble up a bunch of houses and then it's fine. You could do anyway and go for it.
Right.
So I'm on the other side of that argument. If this goes the other way, I have no problem, but I agreed with the Highlands. You're going to create a lot more non-conforming lots. There's only 6 lots involved. And I think if somebody had a proposal and they felt they needed more space to do it, they would assemble lots anyway. So you know, I tend to agree with the Highlands on that one, but I'm not gonna dig my heels in on it.
So could we proceed with going with the new regulations for the R75 lots for the majority of the homeowners in there now? Not address the commercial aspect of it?
If that's the case, sure, it can be done that way, that's not a problem.
It doesn't preclude us from never doing that again, but at this time, we could proceed that way.
Yes, and it doesn't take away from the protection of the homeowners.
Right.
I mean, that, if we proceed with the residential portion, the people that are living down there will gain the extra protection and get a little simpler way to do improvements to their house. And it won't do anything for the commercial guys, they'll be doing what they always did.
Their grandfather did anyway.
That's right.
But it would also generate then the opportunity to not to buy out the other side of the house that live in a dormant also. You know what I mean? Because if somebody wanted to do that, I mean, I would look at it, and, you know, and say, hey, I could buy the other half and sell this commercial someday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's, you gotta look at all sides of it.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it would be as it is today, within the commercial portion.
Unless it exists as a commercial entity now, and he's grandfathered in, if he does sell it and they want to do anything as far as expansion or change the use of it,
Yep.
he'd have to go for a variance anyway.
Right. Commercially, that's
Commercial.
correct. That's correct.
Yep.
So,
So you're saying it doesn't matter here?
I'm not saying that it doesn't matter, but I would like to see the residential, the existing residents go to the R75 and get the protections of that, but we not go enforcing the 10,000 square foot minimum lot size for the commercial now, since it only involves 6 lots or so, and that we're not precluded from ever revisiting again by doing it.
So can I make a
I
motion
also,
for that?
oh yeah, absolutely.
So I'd like to make a motion, if I word it correctly here, that we work on the residential and step them out and leave the commercial alone at this point. All
Well,
right, where we come back and address it later.
to address that, well, you've made the motion. Do I hear a second on that?
I don't know if it's worded with enough detail, but I agree in concept.
Okay. Further discussion on that now. We have a motion and a second. If we could also address the property behind the mall, that we leave that alone also at this point, and make it all one resolution
Yeah,
to forward this up to whatever the next step's going to be, because we'll have to forward it back to Highlands, correct?
Yes, we'll make the changes that come out of the meeting tonight, the board's recommendations. This will be forwarded up to the Highlands. Hopefully, and I think they will, we'll get a clean bill of health. It'll come back to this board, and at that point, this board can, when it chooses, hold a public hearing and adopt this as an amendment to the master plan. And at that point, after that, again, at the board's choosing, when, it doesn't have to be immediate or at all, then you can think about drafting ordinances, making recommendations to council, and then council would have to go through their process to adopt the zoning change.
Yeah, that would have to be an ordinance transmitted to Highlands to be included in the master plan revision, correct?
Well, the ordinances, this should give us essentially the Highlands input as to the ordinances. Obviously, if we adopt them, the Highlands will get to look at the ordinances, but this really will give the basis for council, if they choose, to adopt
it.
These recommendations.
That's basically where we're going, is to make this work presentable to the council, and it's their option.
If they
to
want
pass
to do
an
it.
ordinance,
Yeah,
and
I mean, they still don't have to, the council doesn't have to do any of this if they don't want to.
Right.
So that's where we are on the thing right now. So it would go up, they will approve it, it'll come back here. The board, I assume, then will hold public hearings to get the public to come in and, you know, see if they absolutely agree with this. And then you can adopt it as an amendment, which becomes part of the master plan. And then the ordinance section is well, that can immediately follow or could take months. There's no timeline to actually produce the ordinances.
If I'm correct, and I'm trying to follow all these moves here, the only thing that we're doing is changing the setbacks and all that for the residential people in that R75, right, that zone.
You're moving the zone line there.
Zone line, right.
Yes.
And other than that, we're accepting all the recommendations that you have in your report that the Highlands basically spoke on. Am I correct?
Yes.
Am I basically correct in that, so
Yes.
couldn't that be the motion? The motion would be to accept the report with the changes to the R75 line for the residential zone changes, would it be?
I'm okay. I'll receive mine.
No, I'm just,
No, I'm okay.
listen, I'm just trying to,
Word better.
simplify it so that we're covering everything and we're not piecemealing it, because
Basically, we're accepting the...
right, because basically we're accepting. Right, because their recommendation was to leave the piece behind the mall alone. Their recommendation was, don't mess with this business district, right? They said we could do whatever we wanted to do with the R75. They were okay, either or, it didn't matter to them. And then those other small parcels, right, they were okay. So I'm just, if we're gonna, to make one sweeping motion, we make a motion to just accept the report that with the Highlands recommendations and changing.
In their recommended change.
And in the recommendation,
Yeah,
in the recommended changes to the R75 line.
Basically, that's what...
Yeah, the business side, that really wasn't recommendation. I think they said for your consideration.
Right.
That wasn't a...
Yes, right.
Then the other suggestion I had with respect to the best management practices, rather than reference individual code sections, just say be incorporated into the land use code. It may show up in one place, it may show up in an amendment, I don't know yet.
All right.
The mechanism is
Yeah, that's to
Yeah,
be
it's
determined.
I mean,
Yeah.
all we were saying is that it should apply to the non.
Yeah, and that's what I'm suggesting.
But again, it's one of their recommendations, so, right?
It won't really affect the residents.
So would you like to,
No.
I'll rescind.
Yes.
do you want to rescind it, or do you want to amend your motion?
Yeah,
I'll rescind it because I like the way you said it.
All right, the second.
You're up,
That's why I'm learning.
You're making the motion then?
I'll make the motion that we
First have to
accept the
get through
recommendations that the
Make a motion
Highlands
and
made
second.
with the changes to the R75 line.
No, second him. I second him.
You're gonna
I
second me.
Carl, second.
Second, Mr. Fishback.
The second had to be
We
rescinded
have
from.
to get rid of the first.
Right,
Whoever,
whoever,
let's be clear, you made a motion, I believe it was seconded,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Yes, it was by member Pryor.
So
you have to
you would like
rescind your
Nat to
second.
rescind your motion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Who's the second?
Member Pryor.
he has to rescind his
Do
second.
you rescind your second?
I guess. You want it? Oh,
No, you're rescinding the second.
oh, to his? Yes, I take that back.
Okay, so that motion fails.
Got it.
Okay, now I'm gonna make my motion is to accept the changes, recommendations from the Highlands with the changes to the R75 line with the setbacks.
George, that's good for you?
Yeah, I know what the board wishes.
Yeah.
And I second that.
Yes.
I don't know if I said the
Okay.
right.
In accordance with the board's wishes.
Beth, can we have a roll call, please?
Yeah, members Korea.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Chirchesky.
Yes.
Pryor.
Yes.
Weeks.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Fishback.
Yes.
Chairman Van Lee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now we move up to the
I just said.
planning board rules and regulations discussion. Last time we had moved out, passed out a copy of the rules and regulations on conduct for
Yes.
planning board members. We'll Refer to our
Yeah, no.
attorney on which way we're going on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and as you noted, I did distribute this draft of planning board rules and regulations at the last meeting for your consideration. The good thing is tonight, no matter what you tell me, you don't need to make individual motions. to actually do anything. You just need to give me some direction, some consensus as looking at them, so that I can ultimately incorporate you, if you wish, into these rules and regulations. And then if it's clear enough, at the next meeting, it would be on for a resolution of adoption of these rules and regulations, and that would be the motion that you have. So tonight, I just need guidance. I don't need any type of specific motion. So with that preface being said, the rules and regulations that I have before you are really a cobbling of different rules and regulations from various boards that I've worked on in the past, and also from model rules and regulations as provided in the Cox book. So this was a general draft. Certainly, I can anticipate that there's going to be a lot of comments and changes. I know one off the bat is the 10:30, and reflected in here is actually 10 o'clock, so I've already noted that in mind.
Starting time, too.
The starting time as well. Again, it was just, this was the starting point for fine tuning by you guys. So I leave it to you guys as to your direction, how you would like to tell me to change this. I'm sure that you guys can just do an open kind of discussion, free-flowing discussion, whoever wants to.
I have a suggestion, Mr. Chairman, just, towards the evening away. And there's no need to get this done by next month either. I've given some suggestions to the chairman. He'll pass them on to you. I suggest everybody do the same. And you have a word processor. My own feeling is you throw the changes on there, we'll see them all together, and we can cross out or argue or whatever we want to do next month.
So however you guys would like.
Otherwise, you'll be sitting here taking dictation from folks and arguing, and it'll never end. And if you can get it out before the meeting, we'll all have a chance.
However you'd like to do it. These are your rules, they're not mine. These are just...
Mr. Chairman, that's my suggestion.
Just two questions. I was little. Who commissioned this?
It was actually discussed in the February meeting.
That we are drafting a new, did we have an old one?
No, that was the problem.
That was the issue.
And you grabbed from, would you be so kind as, give me a pen, tell me what other ordinances or you grabbed from other towns, so I can...
I did ordinances at the Township of Little Falls that incorporated these changes.
Okay.
I've looked at other ones from my directory in my computer from other municipalities that we represent, and also from the Cox book.
Okay. Have you had any discussion with any board members in regards, or did you just come up with everything?
Yeah, it was a discussion that was here on the February meeting.
But you have not had any discussion with anybody in regards to what to put in here and not?
No, no discussion.
Everything in here is coming from you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you now have a chance to review it and make your comments on it.
Thank you.
I do have one, actually, I think I could probably do that with an email. But it might, actually, it's a really quick one, so. On section 4.7, we just said that the minutes are made for public inspection. We mean after the minutes are approved by us.
That is
right?
correct.
The approved minutes are made, okay.
Yes, things like that you can put in there, and I would be able to put that
Right, and
into
I
that
guess,
section.
I mean, I can, I'll ask you in an email, but on under section 3.3, under the ethics, the last paragraph where board members choose whether or not there's a conflict, what town or specific statute did that come from? That doesn't seem like that's something that came from you, Mr. Attorney. It looks like it was something that was kind of spoon-fed to you, and I don't think it's...
No, you're full of baloney, and I'll tell you that right now.
It looks like it's something that's
That came
Can you finish my thought?
with his first, no, yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, when you say it looks like it was spoon-fed, you're full of baloney.
It was just my opinion, and I just wanted to follow up that. It doesn't look like it's consistent with the municipal land use law, or would be upheld by...
It actually is, and we'll discuss that next time.
So,
Excuse me, sir.
So I like to so if I reach out to you and say, well, can you tell me where this came from, or what kind of...
Actually, I created that. And this was the basis of my creation of that, is that this board has to police itself to some degree. At some point, conflicts of interest have to be resolved. So the entire idea about this is that if there's an obvious conflict of interest, and if there's a member that, after consultation, does not want to step down despite an obvious conflict of interest, it will poison every type of action that the board takes thereafter. There is no resort to the courts at that point in time, because you have an applicant in front of you possibly. So it's up to the board to actually make a motion to actually require that. It's the board's inherent powers, in my legal opinion, to be able to do that for its members.
Right.
So just as if, and I'll just use an example, just because there was limitations out of Montville, there was a councilwoman who made very bad comments, at least public perceived them. The only thing that they could really do is censure that particular person, but the governing body had an inherent ability to do that, inherent jurisdiction over its own members.
No.
So that's where this comes from.
I would think that gives any, and I don't say that that is the case here, right? I'm just saying that would give any partisan board the ability to silence any member they do not wish to have. I think that's inherently undemocratic. I very much would like to know in what other town you have implemented this very change. I do not believe that that is upholdable in court. I don't think you can. I don't think the board has any, or supersedes any state law. That is something which is something I just don't understand. That will mean if for whatever reason, and I know Joe loves me and Tom, everybody likes me, but if they would not like me, right, for whatever reason, they could just say, you know what, the guy is conflicted, even if I'm not, and there's no recourse for me to just say, you know what, that is not right. I think we have, what is it called? Department of what?
Local government.
You know what, all that can be debated, it's not going to be debated tonight, and I'm sure Mr. Bryce can explain
I
that.
don't know why, Joe, why you say what is debated and what is not debated.
Can I speak?
Yes.
I mean, we open it up saying open for debate, and I just don't know why one member of this planning board just speaking out that it's not debatable means that it's not debatable.
I agree with Joe. I think,
No.
I think it would be fair to everyone to review it on our own and give our opinions to the chairman and to Chairman Bryce,
No.
and then come back.
Mr. Bryce will
We
vet
have
all
this
this. We appreciate Peter's legal opinions. I'm sure he's trained.
Right, and I guess that,
We have this for 3 weeks, did you not look at it?
Yes.
I did not have this. I was not here and I did not get it in the email. But
No.
Before,
I know you included in that email because I looked at it.
I don't, okay, I've been having a problem. My email is not the email that you sent it to. That is my old email.
Okay.
I do not use that. Beth and I have had a discussion about it. I do not use that email. I do not
Okay.
see the email because I do not have that email
Get it changed.
open.
well, I mean, certainly, putting questions in writing and, emailing the attorney are good ideas. My biggest concern is this whole land use law is a very complicated law, and it's even more complicated when you get into ethics. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be resting on the opinions of the board majority who are not trained in this. I believe what you said earlier was a great idea, is if you're not sure, you seek the attorney's, you seek the attorney's opinion first. I mean, that's the first thing to do. It's like, well, if there's an accusation,
Your opinion, and you're the individual involved, the opinion of someone else that would be a reasonable person who thinks you have a conflict.
right, and that's not the board's. So I guess my question, if I said,
But that's the definition.
Tom, you have a conflict, and you say, well, no, I don't think so. Well, let's ask the attorney. That's a reasonable step. You get the attorney's opinion. Now, if the attorney says, Tom, I think you have a conflict. Now, if you disregard the attorney's.
Okay, so to that point, and I decide, no, I still disagree, then it's the board's action, based on this, to take the action based on the attorney's recommendation to make that board member recuse itself. That's how I'm looking at this.
I'm looking at it a little bit differently.
I'm looking at this as that we're going to the question of a conflict of interest is going to come up, and if a person disagrees that that they're conflicted, then we're going to refer to the professional.
Exactly.
And then the professional is going to go, yes or no, or maybe we need to look into this more. I mean, I don't know really, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how that goes. But if the professional turns around and says, yeah, I do see that could be a possible or a potential conflict of interest. Because it could even be just a potential conflict of interest. It doesn't need to be like right in stone.
Okay.
And then once he does that, if I turn around and says, well, I really don't think the lawyer's right.
Okay.
I don't think the lawyer's right, and I'm not going to recuse myself from anything, then it's the board's position at that point, based on what's written here, to make that decision based on that attorney's, because now they're making what a reasonable man would make. It's no different than being a trustee of an ERISA fund. You make reasonable decisions based on a reasonable man, right? And then you make that decision. Now, I'm sure it could be argued through, whatever, but I'm just saying, that's how I look
take it
at
one
it.
step further, where I would say that the board should not have the power to overrule our attorney's decision, or a court of law.
I have no power.
That's it.
You have to be.
I mean, your opinion is very, we
His
respect your
opinion
opinion.
is that
This is your
an
business.
opinion.
Right, so we're basically...
The other thing you're going to get into is the fact that you're putting the board attorney in an untenable position.
No, we don't.
Because he represents the board in total, not an individual.
Now, what happened in the past, and you as a legal professional, I will let you know, I will consult my own attorney on the matter, but our former board attorney, Tony, we were not agreeing on a matter like that. It went to, what's it called?
Department of Community Affairs.
And you get an answer in 9 months.
DCA.
It goes to DCA.
You get an answer in 9 months, and what do you do with the applicant standing
So
in front of
it
you?
goes before that. Is that not the right way to do it? Go before
Now,
the
Peter, answer me. What do you do with the applicant standing in front of you? You're gonna wait 9 months.
Just consider the effect it has on a vote for the township on the board. If you give the applicant the opportunity to come up with some reason why anyone who was accused of having a conflict of interest is allowed to vote on it,
Now,
then that jeopardizes the entire process.
Gary, if we wouldn't know that Joe thinks that everybody has conflict of interest, I would be not that concerned. But since I know how we operate for the last year and a half, where Joe is
I wasn't here to comment on
things go to DCA.
last
That
year and a
step
half.
to go to the DCA, is that not the legal step to do it?
I don't think so, no.
So you think our former attorney did something wrong here?
I don't
Yes.
know what he did, or...
Because it
usually
came
when
back.
the DCA is on a complaint, on an allegation that somebody breached the local government ethics law.
And is your legal opinion that if we exclude any member from doing his duty based on the board's opinion, that is for the record, that is your opinion, that it is upholdable in court? So if I go to the court and I sue the board because you think that decision by the board to exclude a member, that is upholdable, I just want to have your opinion on the record that is your statement.
No, yeah, I can take a further look into it for you. I
Maybe
just
you
can't
want-
imagine, excuse me, let me finish. Hold on. Okay.
Sorry.
The fact of the matter is, if a board takes action where a member has a known conflict of interest that is patent and clear, and the applicant is aware of that conflict of interest, and the board, let's say, denies an applicant an application, that entire decision is subject to reversal based upon that very single conflict of interest. So, if you're a member and you have a patent conflict of interest, patent conflict of interest, obvious one, and despite that, you won't remove yourself, the board is put into a position, the board itself is put in a position where no matter what action it takes, it is going to be subject to judicial review and reversal. And the board has some inherent authority to control its own membership. It has to at some level. So if there's a member who is under this schematic that is removed from that, and you think that your rights as a member have been somehow impaired by the board's action, you can take that up with the courts to see if the board was right.
Okay.
Here's my theory on it, and board. I don't want to be a dead board. Don't make me waste my time with people knowing or not knowing. Get yourself your head in your game, know where you're headed, and knock off the crap. I'm gonna word it just like that. You know whether you're conflicted. If you don't think you're conflicted, all right, sit back and look at it, all right? I had to sit back and look at myself, Pete, for the position I hold. I had to sit back and say, am I conflicted with dealing with these issues? All right, and I have to accept that, all right? There's gonna come a point that there's gonna be somebody that I deal with that I'm gonna go, listen, I deal with them, you know what I mean? And it's just how I deal with it, all right? I'm not talking about the past, I don't care about the past. I know you might, because what you went through, but this is a different board, all right? So let's give it a chance, let's try it. Hold on, don't come to me. Don't do that, all right? I'm telling you right now, it needs to, the board needs to move. I felt it's been dead too long, and it has to grow. It has to succeed. So as a body of people, it's time to grow. All right? Search yourself out, you know it. And if somebody questions it, and we go that route, let's do it in a manner that is respectful and come to an answer. All right? I would rather you say to me, I feel you're conflicted, and I go, you know what? I'm okay with that. And I step out. Than I am to drag every one of us in a court, all right, and pay a bill for no reason. And that's my opinion on it all. So, thank you.
If we wouldn't have a case which is currently pending, right? I would agree with you. I have a board member here, Carlos. Now let me finish it.
Yep.
Right, where we have word from our attorney, where Carlos asked our attorney, can I sit here? And the attorney said, yes, you can. And I have a member prior saying, no, he can't. Now I have a member prior calling his friend, and he's sitting in the diner with Gary and his other people and talking about Carlos and figuring out, you know what? We overrule our attorney. You don't really like Carlos, right? And that's the end of Carlos. And it doesn't matter what the attorney
Where were
says,
you?
and it doesn't matter what...
Were you in the diner that time? When I was having a proposed conversation with Joe on that?
I find it troubling. I personally find it troubling that in an environment which is as partisan, and I wish it would not be like that, as partisan as it is, right, that a board is able to silence one member, right, it's very, very troubling to me, and I hope it's upholdable in court, and I guarantee you, I will challenge you every step of the way.
Yeah,
I just want to be clear. These are not my rules. These are a draft. You guys agreed with them. These are the rules that I've drafted for your consideration. Don't challenge me.
I'm very much interested to see in what other towns that has been implemented.
Okay.
And I'm very much looking forward to letting me know where that has happened.
Okay.
I'm only 20 years old. I'm studying to go to law school. I'm not no means a lawyer. I'm studying to law school. I think that at every level of government, there is an ethics law. In Congress, they have a board of ethics where they discuss matters like that. This is acceptable because, and as a member of the board, I don't understand why you would, if you know that you have a conflict of interest, I know that I have a conflict of interest, I don't understand why you would want to go through the trouble of spending taxpayer money to put things through court when you know that you have a conflict of interest. So it's not like anyone is trying to silence you. If I know that I have a conflict of interest, I'm not going to sit here and say, I want to be a part of this, so that I can ruin the deal for the applicant, I can ruin the deal for the board, I can make the whole process reversible. Knowing I have a conflict of interest, no one's trying to silence me when there is a known, obvious conflict of interest in my hands. It's not like I'm sitting here saying, I'm not going to try to say you can't be involved without evidence that you have a conflict of interest. So no one is sitting here trying to silence you. It is a matter of ethics. It's a very understandable law. No one is trying to silence you in it, though that's the whole point. The point is that you have a conflict of it. In the case that you have a conflict of interest, you are not to be involved with that application. So it's not that someone's trying to silence you. That's what I don't understand.
First of all, I don't have a conflict of interest. That's what means, all right?
No.
I'm just saying any time.
I'm saying.
But what you say assumes that the person, your assumption is that the person has an obvious conflict of interest and he just denied it.
That's what the law says. No, but I'm saying that is exactly what the law says.
if there is an obvious conflict of interest, there is evidence. If you were to put this in a court of law, there is evidence that there is a conflict of interest. But for any reason, so it's not to come at anyone. It's saying if for any reason this person has, wants to be involved, but doesn't want to say why, but there is evidence on the table that they should not be. That is why the board will be able to vote. So they cannot silence you if there is not hard evidence that there is a conflict of interest.
What has happened in the past year, it went to the DCA. I think that's the organization who rules over this, all right? So there's a body in place who is bipartisan and is not involved, because that's what we want, right? We want a bipartisan party deciding if that member is conflicted or not. You don't want the partisan, you want bipartisan, right? You want somebody who's objective looking into that and saying yes or no, right? That's what you want, right?
Well, they're the oversight.
This board is
They're the
not
oversight.
appointed on.
I mean, there's a body in place who does this.
It's just,
there's a-
But it should never have to go that far, because if there is hard evidence, there should be no reason to deny it. That's the whole point of this. But it is protecting the board as a whole. If someone were to have an evident conflict of interest, this law is merely protection of the board as a whole, so that the person cannot forcibly put themselves with involvement in the application. That is what it is saying.
That would be also fine. Let me finish one thing here,
This
if
is
I
it,
can.
no, this is
Okay.
it, you can have this conversation
Okay.
later, but we're getting too far afield here
Okay.
on what we're actually trying to accomplish here.
Thank you. I'll answer.
So, that's why we're promulgating the rules and regulations, because it was obvious that we didn't have, and a lot of people had indicated that they didn't know what they were supposed to do in these kind of situations. So, we're promulgating a rules of procedure, shall we say.
Thanks, Gary.
So, and you're gonna have input on what we're gonna do. You can forward it to me, or I'll forward it to the chairman. It'll probably be the best way to do it.
That's fine.
So he's not getting 27 different directions. Email me what your suggestions are, the way you'd like to see the wording, what you object to in it, and we will forward it to the attorney, and we'll take it up, if we have that by next time. We're not rushing to get it done, we want to get it done right, so.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that everything go through the chair, and the chair will communicate with the attorney, then there's no allegations that somebody spoon-fed somebody.
I'd like all of the board members to realize that our board attorney is here for the good of the board and does not represent any individual. So if you're looking for a legal opinion on what you want to do, I would suggest you contact your own attorney, or if that would alleviate you from any problem of...
I am the board's attorney, I'm not, as you said, the individual attorney. And it is, the entire design of this is to try to actually create some mechanism by which the board can actually rule on something that could go before a court. Be reviewed. And I will say, when it comes to conflicts of interest, they can become very difficult issues to resolve. So there's an entire body of law, and it's an always changing body of laws, conflicts of interest. We have the local government's ethics law, which you guys are expected to follow. And there's cases about it all of the time. And sometimes courts will find them, sometimes they won't. They're very fact sensitive. The rule of thumb is that if you think you may have a conflict of interest because it doesn't feel right, or something seems off, you probably do. That's the rule of thumb. And that's the same you guys are held to, so.
All right, well, let's go.
Thank you, that's really clear, because every case isn't easy.
No, it's not.
No,
It's not so simple.
It's not black and white.
It'd be great.
I mean, Joe recused himself from the order of Rich. If he didn't do it himself, who here would have known that he felt that he had a conflict?
Yes, and I don't know what's going on, Carlos, but the way I look at it is it's better to walk away. And if you even think that you're in the middle of something, then hold on, listen, I'm not saying he is or isn't, I don't know what's going on. But I'm just telling you, from me, I will walk away first, and that's to be excused before you will ever get me to that level. You know what I mean? You say you think I might, done. It doesn't matter to me. I don't-
It might be
you
a
know what I
different
mean?
perspective. In any event, this is
That's
what
the way I
we're
look
looking
at
at.
it. Yes.
So, anybody who has anything, you all have my email address, I
I don't want,
believe.
I want her to, the planning board.
Oh, come on, just in here.
I'm sorry, I
I didn't
didn't...
hear last thing you said, but
Oh,
Email address.
do you have my email address? I think
yeah.
Yeah, okay. If you have any suggestions, or just email me something, and I'll make sure they're forwarded.
absolutely.
Unless you want to send it to me in Swahili, and that's not really a language I'm overly familiar with, so. Okay, no further discussion on that. I'll ask for public comment. Doesn't look like we have any kind of a public, so
You won't get any of that.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's okay.